Ciao, travelers, and welcome to our second episode of Season 3. Happy birthday, America 250. And before we get in, let's do some trivia. And I kind of forgot what questions I did. So if I did these questions, I apologize, okay? All right. I think I did these. Samuel Morse was one of our greatest inventors. Did he invent television or the telegraph? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And the telegraph. In 1844, he strung a line from Washington to Baltimore and tapped out the words, "What hath God wrought?" So, telegraphs were the first text messages way back when. I might do an article on that episode. Okay, on what day in November do we honor all the Americans who served in the armed forces? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that is Veterans Day. And which airport in New York City is known for its initials of a U.S. president? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that is JFK, for John F. Kennedy International. I will say that it's cheaper to fly to JFK, but I live in New Jersey, so Newark is my go-to. Okay, so we're going to get into the history of tea taxation and the use of Jersey tea in colonial America. I want to thank Green Team member Raina for bringing this up to the Green Team, because this is a native plant. All right, so a little bit about the background of tea. Tea arrived in Europe from China during the 17th century through expanding international trade. The British East India Company became one of the largest importers of tea into Great Britain, making it widely available to consumers. So kind of there were big corporations back then. People would ship in money, and then they would have these great explorations finding tea, spices, and all that stuff. Although tea was initially considered a luxury reserved for wealthy families, its popularity grew as prices gradually declined. By the early 18th century, drinking tea had become an important social custom throughout Britain and its North American colonies. Colonists drank tea at meals, during social gatherings, and in business meetings. Tea became so common that many households consider it an everyday necessity. So back then, tea was bigger than coffee. And in some countries, tea is still bigger in the amount of consumed. Because tea generated significant revenue, the British government imposed taxes on its importation and sale. Britain had accumulated large debts after fighting several costly wars, including the French and Indian War, which ended in 1763. Parliament believed that the American colonies should help to pay for the expense of defending British territory in North America. As a result, lawmakers introduced several new taxes on the colonies, including taxes on printed materials, glass, paper, paint, lead, and tea. One of the earliest controversial measures was the Stamp Act of 1765, which required many printed documents to carry official tax stamps. Colonial opposition forced Parliament to repeal the act, but tensions between Britain and the colonies continued to grow. In 1767, Parliament passed the Townshend Acts, which imposed duties on several imported goods, including tea. Colonists argued that these taxes violate their rights because they had no elected representation in Parliament. The phrase "no taxation with representation without," became a rallying cry for colonial resistance. In response to the Townshend duties, many colonists organized non-importation agreements and pledged to stop purchasing British goods. Merchants reduced imports, and families sought locally produced alternatives whenever possible. Women played a particularly important role in these boycotts because they often were responsible for purchasing household goods and preparing food and beverages. By refusing to buy imported tea, they demonstrated political support for colonial rights while encouraging greater economic independence. Although most of the townshend duties were repealed in 1770, Parliament kept the tax on tea to maintain its authority over the colonies. In 1773, Parliament passed the Tea Act, which allowed the financially struggling British East India Company to sell tea directly to the colonies at lower prices. Even though the tea became less expensive, the tax remained in place. Many colonists viewed the act as an attempt to persuade Americans to accept Parliament's right to tax them. Resistance intensified throughout the colony. So this is still a big thing now, taxation. And that's really rooted in our history. The most famous protests occurred on December 16th, 1773, when members of the Sons of Liberty boarded the British ships in Boston Harbor, Massachusetts, and dumped 342 chests of tea into the water. Rather than lowering tensions, the protests led Parliament to pass the coercive acts known in the colonies as the Intolerable Acts, which punished Massachusetts and further united colonial opposition. These escalating conflicts eventually contributed to the outbreak of the American Revolution in 1775. As imported tea became associated with British control, many colonists turned to herbal beverages made from native plants. One of the most important substitutes was Jersey tea, also known as New Jersey tea, which comes from the leaves of the plant. This small shrub grows naturally throughout much of eastern North America, especially in dry forests, open woodlands, and prairies. Indigenous people had long recognized the plant's value and used it for medicinal purposes before European settlement. To prepare Jersey tea, the leaves are harvested, dried, and steeped in hot water, much like traditional tea. Some people also lightly roasted or fermented the leaves before brewing them to create a richer flavor. Kind of like coffee, that people roast that. Although Jersey tea contains no caffeine, its taste resembles mild black tea, making it an appealing substitute for imported Chinese tea. During the Revolutionary era, drinking Jersey tea became a patriotic act because it reduced dependence on British imports while supporting the colonial boycott. Something interesting too, and this happens, when the original settlers came to the United States, they had ties, direct ties. They're from Great Britain. But as the next generation came, they only knew about America, North America. So they didn't have those ties and that kind of bond or patriotism to United Kingdom or Britain, but more towards America. So that's another interesting thing that you see in generations is their change of thinking, and they favor less their home countries and then more into the American identity. Jersey tea was only one of many herbal beverages used during this period. Colonists also brewed drinks from raspberry leaves, sage, peppermint, wintergreen, chamomile, and other native plants. However, Jersey tea became one of the best known alternatives because it closely resembled the imported tea in appearance and preparation. The popularity of these substitutes reflected the colonists' determination to support political resistance through everyday actions. Even simple choices about what to drink became connected to broader debates about liberty and self-government. After the American Revolution, imported tea gradually returned to American markets as trade with Britain and other nations resumed. Although Jersey tea became less common as an everyday beverage, the plant continued to be appreciated for its historical significance, ornamental beauty, and ecological value. Today, Jersey tea is cultivated in gardens because of its attractive white flowers and its ability to support pollinators such as bees and butterflies. And this is what we're focusing in Farallon on the green team. We actually just passed a native plant ordinance where 70% of all plants planted on borough property are to be native, which is we're one of the very few communities in New Jersey, if not the only one in Bergen County to my knowledge. So go Farallon. Historians and historical interpreters also use Jersey tea to demonstrate how ordinary colonists participated in struggle for independence. The story of tea taxation and Jersey tea demonstrates that history is often shaped by everyday decisions much as by famous battles and political leaders. British taxes on tea helped unite the American colonies in opposition to imperial policies, while the adoption of Jersey tea reflected the willingness of ordinary people to change their daily habits in support of political principles. What began as a dispute over taxation eventually became part of a larger movement for independence. Jersey tea remains a lasting symbol of colonial resourcefulness, self-reliance, and the important role that simple acts of resistance played in the founding of the United States. And that's something, as I grow older, to understand, is that you really have an impact. And especially when you surround yourself around people, like-minded people that want to do good, and you motivate each other and you support each other, things happen. Might be slow, might be difficult, you might not be popular, but change will come. And that's the cool thing about community involvement. As you know, I'm on green team zoning. Get involved in your community. It is so cool. You meet so many people and you actually get to see the change. I could be like, wow, the green team planted that dream and a tree. You see people walking around with the plants. It's just a good synergy, and that builds upon actions on action. So get involved. I was kind of scared at first. I was in my early, maybe mid-20s when I started. Now I'm 40, so I've been doing this for many years. But it's addicting in a good way. It's really great to be involved in your community, and I'm very proud. I'm very proud of my team, town. So I hope the good work continues, and I hope I motivate you to get involved. All right, so let's go back to our good old school brain quest. All right. Was the colony of Pennsylvania founded by William Penn or William Pitt? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that's William Penn, Pennsylvania, hello, in 1682. Which state does not share a border with Canada? Michigan, Oregon, or Idaho? Oregon, whose neighbor is the north, Washington State, shares a border with Canada. And last but not least, is Foggy Bottom, it's a silly name, right, the nickname of the U.S. State Department or the U.S. Treasury? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it is the U.S. State Department, whose offices were built in a former swamp in Washington, D.C. I love D.C. I just came back from the weekend with my besties. They live down there, and then my other friend, bestie, came down, and I just love D.C. Hey, explore the nation's capital, and we will be talking that in a podcast soon. So remember, be cool, be wise. I totally forgot my geography saying, but that's okay. And until the next episode, ciao, travelers.